Thank you very much. So now it's time to move to the next speaker. So the next speaker is Dr. Johann, who is the academic coordinator at the Center for Advanced Studies in Bioethics at the University of Münster, Germany. And Dr. Ach will present, let's say, some ethical issues and societal expectations about nanomedicine. Johann, the floor is yours.
Yes, thank you very much for inviting me to this workshop. I'm going to talk about some ethical issues and societal expectations in nanomedicine. Well, this one? Okay. Okay, and as a philosopher, I should perhaps start with saying some words on what nanomedicine actually is. But as it turns out, this is not a question easy to be answered. There is no commonly accepted definition of nanomedicine by now. And to make things easy, at least for me, I only would say that nanomedicine is an application of the nanotechnologies or the nanobiotechnologies in medicine. As enabling technologies, nanotechnology and nanobiotechnology open up a vast diversity of new options and applications. And in my view, at least, this might happen by certain features of nanobiotechnology. First of all, miniaturization, and then interaction of abiotic with biological systems, and thirdly, improved and often novel physical, chemical, and biological properties of materials at the nanometer scale. It is, in my view, more or less these three features of nanotechnology that cause ethical issues in nanotechnology and in nanomedicine as well. And what is coming in the next minutes, I try to figure out some of the ethical issues in nanomedicine and try to, well, give you a kind of map of the ethical issues in nanomedicine. We have to talk, first of all, on the environmental health and safety risks associated to nanobiotechnology and associated to nanomedicine. Think of nanoparticles. By now, we do not know very much about how they function, what they are doing. We do not know very much about the toxicity of nanoparticles. And so they may very well pose risks to the health of humans and of animals, and they may very well cause damage to the environment as well. Then, secondly, we have to talk about the ethical, legal, and social issues, LC issues or LC aspects. Here, first of all, we have to talk about the gap between diagnostic and therapeutic options. We have to face the problem of collection and storage of health-related data. We have to talk about the right to know and the right not to know. It's clear from the outset that patients do have a right to know about all what is known about the condition of their own body, but at the same time, they do have a right not to know what they do not like to know. And the problem will be how to safeguard both of these rights for patients. And we have to talk about the risk of unfair discrimination, for example, in the context of so-called personalized diagnostics or therapy. We have to talk about political and security risks. And by this, I mean that a lot of things that are developed in nanomedicine can not only be used for therapeutic measures, but can also be used for warfare or terrorism or things like that. And we have to talk about what is sometimes called the nano divide. That is the situation that in some parts of the world or some parts of the society, people can afford nanomedicine or nanomedical products, and others maybe cannot afford this. And if this is the case, this would clearly be a problem of distributive justice or of fairness. And last but not least, we should talk about cultural and anthropological concerns. And by this I mean that nanomedicine poses the problem that think of human enhancement. We always have to ask ourselves what we are able to do and what we are allowed to do with humans, what kind of interventions are acceptable. Is there something like human nature that has to be accepted and that has to be respected and stuff like this? If you have followed me so far, you could have got the impression that nothing of this concerns is in every means new. You may have heard of this before, and you may have heard of this before in the context of gene technology or genetic testing and so on and so on. And in my view, this is pretty true. And so my first take-home message would be nanomedicine, as well as nanotechnology or nanobiotechnology, does not raise any specific ethical concerns that would not have been known from other branches of technologies or from other areas of medicine so far. This would be my first take-home message, but this message is followed by a second take-home message very quickly. And this reads that old questions are not necessarily bad ones. Even though these questions or these concerns are quite well known, this does by no means mean that they are adequately met or adequately answered. Well, in my view, and that's the key of my talk, in my view, nanomedicine is part of a concert of new medical technologies, such as pharmacogenetics, biophotonics, telemedicine, e-health, and what have you. What we are facing is a kind of, I would frame it, converging technologies in medicine. Converging technologies that share some common features, such as acceleration, individualization, automation, prevention, orientation, and things like this. And that means that this process of convergingness requires more than the identification of particular technological trends. So to confine oneself to the ethical reflection on nanomedicine would be not enough. I think we should always take care of the greater picture. And I want to confine myself to three questions in this respect. The first question is, how will the converging technologies in medicine affect the healthcare system? I think we will face or are in a situation where we are facing a shift from medical care based on patients' family history, social circumstances, environment and behaviors to genetically based, individualized or personalized medicine. We are facing a shift from symptom to pre-symptomatic medicine, earlier and more personalized risk assessment before symptoms show up. And that means we are facing a shift from curative to preventive care and maybe to an application of nanomedicine and stuff like that in public health. And by now, as I see it, nobody knows what this will turn out, what this means. What this means for the healthcare system, what this means for society, what this means for insurance companies, and so on and so on. My second question is, how will the converging technologies in medicine affect our understanding of disease? And here, my impression is that new diagnostic tools may very well create, in a way, new diseases. What we are facing is a much more earlier diagnosis and much more sensitive diagnosis. And this will mean that disease entities will evaporate in a way, and we will have a vast amount of new diseases in the new future. And what is more imminent is that mere risk factors may turn into a disease. That is, we will have a quite obscure third status, some like in between healthiness and illness. And this is sometimes called pre-symptomatic illness. That is, we will be confronted with people who are not ill, who do not show up any symptoms, but who are carrying some risk factors, and therefore are in a way not healthy anymore, but not ill, and so on. And my third question would be, how will the converging technologies in medicine affect the relationship between physician and patient? Are we facing, I would like to ask, a cultural shift in a way that there are more and more areas where patients could and are willing to interpret data themselves without access being necessarily mediated by physicians or experts? This is something we are already experiencing, and the question will be whether this kind of self-monitoring will enhance the autonomy of patients. This would be one thing one could imagine. Or, on the other hand, whether there will be a kind of information overload on the side of the patients that cannot easily be overcome. And whether or not there will be an exploitation of vulnerabilities and anxieties on the side of patients. And what we can see by now already is that all these kinds of lifestyle tests that are sold over the counter or via the internet is something like a forecast of what we will see in medicine in the near future. So let me sum up a little bit. What we are in need for is, of course, risk assessment and risk management, toxicity testing, development of standards of risk, and we are in need for a life cycle approach, of course, but this is nothing new to you, I think. As I said, all questions are not necessarily bad ones. I do say this as very often it happens that in ethical debates on nanomedicine it is said, okay, there's nothing new, we do all know of the ethical issues, so it is very imminent to say that's right, but none of these issues has been resolved so far. Data protection, privacy, and so on are still imminent features and problems. Don't lose track of the greater picture. I think we have to look at what I called converging technologies in medicine, and we have to look not only at the technological development, but also on the ethical and economical consequences of what we are doing. And finally, we have to do, in my view at least, an integrated approach of doing ethics, that is, implementing ethical reflection on the different levels in research and development and in the clinic, as well as on a local, regional, national, and international level. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Johann. I have time for a couple of questions. Donald, please.
Thank you, Johann, for a very good overview. That's really good. Can I just amplify one thing you said about the old issues? I think it's the case that sometimes the nanotechnologies throw a different light on an old issue, and we see them in a more focused way or in a slightly new angle. And one of them, I think, is to do with some of the questions about diagnostics and the need to know, the right not to know. That's a question that already exists. but maybe if we are now having lab-on-a-chip devices in the local health center where we go for when we have a need for antibiotics for a cough, maybe this is now becoming a very frequent thing, which now raises a much wider scope of people. In instance, the cohort has changed from a narrow thing of a genetic disease family to being all of us. So maybe the sheer scale is one of the things that could also be a kind of an old issue, but in a very new light.
Yeah. Yes, that's pretty right. And I think one can say that very often these old issues are in a way accented in a new way when nanomedicine comes into the play. Think of theranostics. Yeah, we haven't seen something like this before the advent of nanomedicine. Actually, we haven't seen anything like theranostics by now, but we haven't seen the idea of theranostics before the advent of nanomedicine. And so we can very well see that these old issues are in a way framed by what we are experiencing now in nanomedicine. That's pretty true. But in the end, when we come down to the questions, they are in a way the old ones. And I would say, even though you are right, this is the old question of when quantity turns out or turns into quality. And as far as I can see at the moment, we have a quantity problem and not a quality problem here.
Yes, a question in the back, please.
Thank you. Absolutely outstanding presentation. I'd like to just step back to your comment on converging technologies, because I think being in Germany, and I'm in Germany as well, there's a very interesting issue that is starting to come up, which is genetically modified food, genetic modification in order to bring a therapeutic outcome into a patient. And this may not be appropriate, and please correct me if we can talk about this later, but how would you approach that in Germany? Because it's going to be very different than, say, France and the other EU nations, of how to approach that with a new therapy that could replace a pharmaceutical with a more permanent solution with putting a gene in. Is that? It's a very concrete example, so that's why
Yeah. I'm not sure whether I'm the one who should answer questions like this. I'm not quite sure. I don't know. I do not have an answer, I'm afraid. Yeah.
Well, how about a friend? Let me put it in a slightly different vein. How would you approach that framework to answer that question?
Yeah. In principle, it would be a good idea to do. Well, that's all I would like to say.
I have one question, if there is no other question. Since your center in Münster is famous for, let's say, your studies on ethical aspects of nanomedicine, are you consulted by, for instance, the German National Ethics Committee when they receive, let's say, an application dealing with nanomedicine?
No. There's a lot of boards in Germany and a lot of ethics boards. And as far as I know, the National Ethics Board has not discussed questions of nanotechnology or nanomedicine by now. But there are other groups and institutions. There's, say, national nano dialogue group who has worked for a long time. And there is a dialogue group located at the Ministry for Environment, who has done a lot of work on nanotechnology and a little bit on nanomedicine. But it's my impression that the nano hype we have experienced years ago has calmed down a little bit. And so most of the work that is done is not that much in the public, but is done in the offices and bureaucracies and so on.
I don't know how many clinical trials are ongoing in Germany with nanomedicines, but for instance, have you been contacted for consultation for this when these applicants applied for the clinical trials?
No, actually not. And that is one of the reasons why I had this sentence on my very last slide. I think we should do or should have an integrated approach of doing ethics. It is a pity that in all these discussions there's this divide of scientific discussions on the one hand and of ethical reflection on the other hand. And if this is done in that way, ethics comes too late always and is in a way meaningless.
Thank you very much for your answer. So now it's time to have our last speaker.